Let's talk about theoretic tools for understanding vaccine hesitancy. As a reminder, the SAGE Working Group on Vaccine Hesitancy defines vaccine hesitancy as delay in acceptance or refusal of vaccines despite availability of vaccine services. We know that three key factors contributing to vaccine hesitancy are concerns about the safety of vaccines, concerns about the efficacy of vaccines, and on the other hand, lack of concern about the risks of vaccine-preventable diseases. You may be asking yourself, why would anyone have these concerns? It is clear that vaccines are safe and effective, and that vaccine-preventable diseases can have harmful consequences. The frameworks presented in this module will help us understand how people can have these misperceptions, even when confronted with evidence to the contrary. We'll first discuss cognitive dissonance theory. This theory illustrates how people feel a sense of dissonance or discomfort when their beliefs and attitudes are not aligned with their values and identity. Then we'll discuss functional attitude theory, which describes the different functions that a misperception may serve for someone and can help us understand why statistics and evidence may not be useful if they don't connect to the function an attitude serves. Finally, we'll cover how people assess risk using analytic approaches or more effective or feeling-based approaches. This helps us understand how inaccurate risk perceptions regarding vaccines and vaccine-preventable diseases can come to be formed. Cognitive dissonance theory helps us understand why misinformation about vaccine safety and efficacy and disease risk can be attractive to people. Cognitive dissonance theory is premised upon the assumption that we have an innate desire for consistency and balance. We like when our beliefs, attitudes, behaviors, values, and identity are aligned. Research has shown that beliefs about the superiority of alternative or holistic medicine can underlay vaccine hesitancy, and Western medicine has historically been dismissive of such therapies. So we can imagine a hypothetical individual who maintains a sense of self that is grounded in their beliefs about alternative medicine. This corresponds to their value of nature, respect for the earth, and purity. This corresponds to health behaviors in which alternative therapies are used, and, given Western medicine's tendency to dismiss such therapies, Western medicine is avoided. Positive attitudes towards alternative medicine and negative attitudes towards Western medicine follow along as well, and ultimately so do beliefs, such as the belief that chemicals are bad. In this hypothetical individual, all of these elements, beliefs, attitudes, values, identity, and behavior, are aligned. When one of these elements is out of alignment, we feel imbalanced. This is known as cognitive dissonance. We don't like this feeling of dissonance, so we have a drive to avoid it and reduce it. So in this hypothetical, we can see how our public health goals of communicating that vaccines are safe and promoting positive attitudes towards vaccines are out of alignment with this individual's other elements. So since we know that dissonance is unpleasant, there are two pathways this individual could go down to reduce that dissonance. Our hope is that this individual acknowledges that vaccines are safe and develops a positive attitude towards vaccines. In order to do this, they may need to update their other beliefs, attitudes, behaviors, values, and identities. For example, it may be difficult to feel positively about vaccines while maintaining a negative attitude toward Western medicine. So this individual may need to update their attitude toward Western medicine to acknowledge that some interventions, such as vaccines, are positive. However, this pathway is really challenging. Beliefs, attitudes, behaviors, values, and identities are really important parts of who one is. So while we think we are simply trying to communicate a straightforward and evidence-based new belief, we are actually asking people to change higher level and more foundational aspects of themselves in order for them to accept that belief. This is one reason why we see some people struggle to accept evidence-based recommendations for vaccines. Next, we'll discuss functional attitude theory. This theory helps us understand why people may have different attitudes and beliefs. Fundamental to this theory is the notion that different attitudes serve different functions for us. Some attitudes serve a knowledge function, helping us understand and interpret the world. Here, you might imagine an individual learning as much as they can about the COVID-19 vaccine, seeing the evidence that it is safe and effective, and developing a positive attitude toward the vaccine that is based on that evidence. Attitudes can also serve utilitarian purposes, helping us to achieve an end goal. For example, someone might have a positive attitude towards vaccines because it helps them protect their children. A social adjustive function occurs when the attitude helps one fit in with or be more attractive to others. We know that vaccine hesitancy is influenced by social norms, so it is possible that negative attitudes about vaccines could help one fit in with a group of others who also hold these attitudes. Attitudes can also serve value expressive purposes, in which they connect to underlying values and ideologies. As we just discussed, in this case, a negative attitude towards vaccines could be a way of expressing an underlying ideology in support of alternative medicine. This theory provides insight as to why one may have a negative attitude towards vaccines, even in the face of evidence that vaccines are safe and effective. If the attitude serves social adjustive or value expressive purposes, helping them fit in with others or to express underlying values and ideologies, then simply presenting statistics about vaccine safety or efficacy may do little to change that behavior. Finally, let's talk about how people make assessments of risk. The risk is analysis, risk is feelings framework helps us understand why some people believe vaccines are riskier than they actually are, while perceiving vaccine preventable diseases as not as risky as they actually are. We'll first discuss how people use analysis to form risk perceptions, and then how people use feelings to form risk perceptions. The risk as analysis approach involves assessing the likelihood of an event happening and the severity of the outcome if that event does happen. For example, if an individual is making an assessment of the COVID-19 risk involved with attending a party, this would involve first assessing the likelihood that one will get COVID-19 if they attend this party, and the severity of COVID-19 if they were to contract it. We can see here in this example how a young and healthy person's risk assessment might differ from someone who is older and has multiple comorbidities. This is often how scientists think about risk, but people may make errors when using numbers to make risk assessments this way. Importantly, even though this is how scientists and public health officials tend to think about risk, they aren't always good at communicating this information clearly. For example, presentations of relative risk, such as odds ratios, are often used without specifying a baseline rate. This leaves people without a fundamental piece of information needed to make an accurate risk judgment. If we were to say that an intervention reduced the risk of a negative outcome by 50%, it is important to know whether the baseline occurrence of that outcome is 1 out of every 2 times or 1 out of every 100,000 times. People also have trouble applying conditional probabilities to their risk assessments. Statements such as a 5% positivity rate are relatively abstract and can be difficult for people to interpret and apply. Moreover, even when people can accurately interpret and report numerical population-level statistics, they may still be biased to use their real-world experience when ultimately making a judgment. This is known as the description experience gap. People tend to weigh rare events that they have experienced, or that their friends and family have experienced, more heavily, while underemphasizing more common events that they have not experienced. Thus, people who have not personally experienced COVID-19 or known people who have may have a hard time reconciling that experience with population-level statistics, and the real-world experience, or in this case, the lack of experience with COVID-19, may win out in the risk assessment equation. People also use their feelings to make judgments about risk. Specifically, how we feel about something, whether we feel good or bad, can inform how risky we perceive that thing to be. A research study presented participants with a hypothetical scenario in which a child is left alone. In each case, the setting and length of time the child was alone remained the same. For example, an 8-year-old child left alone for 45 minutes at a Starbucks while her mother is 1 block away. But the reason for leaving that child alone differed. Some participants were told that the child was left alone involuntarily because the mother was in an accident. Others were told that the mother had to go to work. Others were told that the mother was volunteering for a charity. Others were told that the mother was off relaxing, and others were told that the mother was having an illicit affair. The study found that as participants' moral outrage at the reason why the child was left alone increased, so did the perceived risk, even though the actual risk to the child was exactly the same. Other work has shown that when people are told a potentially risky thing has high benefits, they perceive it as less risky. When they are told it has low benefit, they perceive it as more risky. This occurs even though the actual risk of something, the likelihood of it causing harm, has nothing to do with the benefit it provides. This all boils down to the notion that we rely on our feelings to make inferences about risk. When we feel good about something, we perceive it to be less risky. When we feel bad about something, we perceive it to be more risky. Thus, it is possible that people may have negative affect toward a COVID-19 vaccine that has little to do with any actual risk of the vaccine. But research tells us that we should expect that negative affect to result in increased worry about the risk of a vaccine. We can now understand vaccine hesitancy using the tools just discussed. Cognitive dissonance theory tells us that a negative attitude towards vaccines could be a way for one to remain consistent with existing beliefs, attitudes, behaviors, values, and identities. Functional attitude theory tells us that a negative attitude towards vaccines could be a way for an individual to connect with others with similar attitudes or to express their values and identities. And finally, even if an individual is willing to accept evidence regarding vaccines, it is possible that it may not be accurately interpreted or that the risk perception is influenced by one's feelings.